Hello, welcome to Check and Test Tech channel. So today we are going to look into the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So I'm going to share you some of my thoughts after reading this book, then also share you about some of the principles outlined by the author in this book, and I hope you will like it. Right, so about this book, it is written by Dale Carnegie and it was published back in 1936, and until today it has sold more than 30 million copies around the world and making it one of the best-selling books of all the time. And one of these Carnegie's influence, as Mr. Warren Buffett admits, was profound. And he said that no business school, to his knowledge, includes Carnegie's famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, in the curriculum. So in this book, in general, there are 4 parts. So part 1 is talking about the fundamental techniques in handling people, followed by the 6 ways to make people like you, then some of the principles about how to win people to the way of your thinking, and lastly is more about the leadership. So there are 3 principles in the first part of the book. So first of all is don't criticize, condemn, and complain. And principle number 2 is to give honest and sincere appreciation. And the third principle is to arouse in other people an eager want. And moving on, if you look into part 2 of the books, altogether there are 6 principles. And then obviously principle number 1 is if you would like to win friends and influence people, it is very important that you yourself become genuinely interested in people. And as you can see as well in the principle number 2 is smile a bit more. Don't frown like, oh, And then principle number 3 is always remember a person's name. Well, because I'm a lecturer and this is something that I use it quite a lot as well. And then it's quite interesting. Sometimes my students will say, oh, check, how come you could remember all of our names? There are about like 50 students in the class. I said, well, although it's not really a superpower, it's because I make an effort. I think remembering names is quite important in terms of building the rapport, and also it is showing, a respect to others. And principle number 4 is be a good listener. And then obviously here, Dale Carnegie talk a lot about active listening, because sometimes we do hear, but whether we listen or not is the other stories. And then in principle 5, it is always important when we establish a conversation with others, we should talk in terms of others' people interests. And principle number 6 is the feeling of importance. Make people feel that they have the sense of importance. And then I quite like the phrases that he mentioned in the book. For example, I'm sorry to trouble you. Will you be so kind to blah, 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 blah. Or would you please to help me with this? Would you mind? And always say thank you. And then moving on, we can look into part 3 of the book, which is on how to win friends to your way of thinking. Well, the first principle Dale Carnegie mentioned about the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. In some ways, this is correct, because even though you win an argument, okay, so what the other people will think about it. You basically, even though you win an argument, but you may upset the other person. Okay, and then in principle number 2, never say you are wrong, because nobody likes to hear it. Well, I must admit as well, if somebody just said on my face, Jack, you are wrong, I wouldn't like it either. And then principle number 3, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and empathetically. Well, I do apply this principle, and then especially in my class, because sometimes, like for example, setting up assignments, sometimes I may get the marks mixed up a little bit, not from the actual marking itself. It's like, for example, when I'm setting up the assignments in the system, when you have so many multiple criteria, well, I can be sure that it doesn't happen very often. But sometimes if, minor mistakes like that happen, I will admit that I'm wrong to my students and they take it okay. And also, when you want to start a conversation, building a relationship, begin in a friendly way. And then the most important thing is when you establish a conversation, if you can get the other person for saying yes, 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 and agreeing with you, which means that you are basically putting yourself and the other person on the same channel, okay? And also let the other person do a great deal of talking, because people like to talk, whether they consciously or unconsciously. People do like to talk about what is so great about themselves. Let them talk about it, and then let them feel as well the idea is his or hers, and try to see things from the other point of view. I think this is something very important, because sometimes it is important not to have too much of a I think, I do, I feel, but then try to think about what others feel. It's just like, for example, when my student couldn't, do a piece of work. So instead of straight away saying that, well, why don't you submit your work? Why you haven't finished your work, etc. But then we try to understand what makes a student couldn't, perform or do the work. Maybe it's because the student's going through some emotional struggle, or the students just, some other reason. So it's important to sort of like see things on the people point of view. Then after that, be sympathetic on others, the ideas and the desires, and then appeal to the nobler motives, dramatize your ideas. I like this one. I think this happens quite a lot when you're pitching, your idea to others, or not really saying preaching, but then sometimes if you want to get a buy-in, it's always good to be able to tell a good story. And also, if things don't work, just throw down the challenge. And sometimes it works very well for the students. So for example, if they feel like don't have the motivation to do it, just tell them that if others can do it, you could do it as well. Right, lastly, if you look into this bit here, you can use it if, let's say that you're leading a group of people at work. I think it's very good in terms for leadership. I think principle number 1, always give praise and honest appreciation. I always believe in that. And principle number 2, call attention to people's mistake indirectly. So this is the place when if somebody is doing something not quite right, so it is okay to tell them, but then instead of straight away telling it on their face, but then try to tell them indirectly. So don't use the word like you are wrong, okay? And then sometimes it's always important that you praise, but then don't use the word but so much. So this happened quite a lot. You will notice that as well. Like some people, they would just say like, oh, Jack, you're doing so good, blah, 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 blah. But so what I have learned as well is every time when I say, people using this kind of way in talking to me, I'll just wait until the but. But then what Dale Carnegie is telling us is don't use the but then use the and. So for example, Chad, you have done so well, and if you could do this and that, it would be even better. Okay. And then, so if really we want to criticize others, we can also talk about our own mistakes. So instead of giving direct orders, we could always ask questions. So use the term like, the question, sort of like the style, like, what about if you do this? What about we do that? Will it be better? And the most important thing is let other person say phrase. And then when you praise, this is the phrase that I like the most. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. And then give somebody a fine reputation to live up to, even though that person is a cleaner in your organization. Encourage, always make encouragement. And then lastly is to make, your team members happy about the work they are doing. Right. That's sort of like summarize all 4 parts and the principles of those 4 parts in the book. So I would say what I like the most about the book is for each of the principles, you will find case examples to go with it. And then obviously, because this book was written back in 1936, so I think the Carnegie organization has updated the case examples, so which is good. And then it is very easy to read. So the wording, everything. So it's as if like, you know, when I'm reading the book, I feel like somebody's actually talking to me about the book. And then, and again, this is something that sort of like gets me a lot, which is this phrase here. So be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. Keep praising. But in this book, it says it very clearly, is that when we are praising others, it doesn't mean that you need to flatter. You need to be sincere in your praise. If it is good, you really praise it. Even though it is a very, very small win, we praise. Okay, but then it doesn't mean that we have to flatter. Well, obviously, if there's something not going right, okay, then we have to tell the person, but use a very indirectly way without saying things like, oh, you're wrong. Okay, right. And it is very important. Well, obviously, this book is talking about how to influence friends and people, isn't it? So obviously, if you would like to, you know, get the most out of this book, you must be, I think, at the first step is to be interested in people, because I think this is a very important thing, regardless what industry you are at or what stage of career you are in as well. Because if you are very good in doing something without human skills, in promoting the idea, promoting what you are good at, you know, that idea could be good, but then it may not be able to go far. Okay, it's just my opinion anyway. So I think after reading the book as well, obviously most of the case examples in the books are all the positive case examples. So one thing that really struck me is that, oh, what if people take, you know, my kindness and friendliness for granted, which it happens sometimes. So I would suggest if you know, the Carnegie organization is thinking to launch another edition of this book, or a revised or improved edition of this book, I think it would be good to also cover, you know, the principles, how to deal with situations where people take our kindness and friendliness for granted. So in overall, I think I will give this book a 4 stars, or 4 stars each. And then I think this book is, and again, very easy to read and is suitable to, you know, young adults, you know, whatever industry you're in or whichever stage of your career is in. Okay, right. So that's all of my book review for this book. So if you would like to share with me some of your thoughts after reading this book, please share it, put down your thoughts in the comments box below. And thank you very much and have a good day.